And then now what I'm seeing is AI is just enabling everything so quickly. I'm living in a prompt that has this incredible amount of power behind it. So it's an extremely simple interface, if we want to be very honest with ourselves, a very, for lack of a better word, dumbed down interface, right? Like we've simplified everything down to where I'm just looking at a single sentence essentially as my input, and output, is where I'm starting at. So I can take a very complex idea or task, prompt it, and have this massive amount of machinery on the back end that I don't know how it works, how it runs, and I don't need to know how it works and runs to get it to do some very complex tasks that could have taken a whole engineering team to do previously.
Virtualized infrastructure across on-premises, data centers, and the cloud was supposed to make things easier for IT teams, but it's often become a complex tangle to manage. So why is something as well established as virtualization turning into a headache, and what is it that we're missing? To find out, I'm joined by Brad Cline, who's Vice President of IT Operations at SolarWinds. With nearly 30 years in IT, Brad has seen virtualization change from a neat idea into a real-world minefield. He's here to help us unpack where IT teams usually come unstuck and how managing virtual environments isn't as simple as it might seem. But before we get started, here's a quick message from the sponsor of today's video, Caresoft. Fails, everything stops. Caresoft helps you recover in minutes, not days. Visit caresoft.com to learn more. Hi, Brett. How are you this morning?
Doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you've been in the IT infrastructure space for almost 30 years, and today, with everything being virtualized, some of it on premises, some of it in the cloud, this is obviously a very complex situation for IT organizations to manage. How does this feel different to when you started out, almost 30 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great one. So, it's tech has been interesting. The thing that drew me to tech in the beginning was that it was always this constantly changing, evolving environment, right? You're gonna have to always learn and relearn your job daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it may be, right? And figure out how these new puzzle pieces kind of go together for a business, and figure out how you can apply that to a business and make that business more effective, efficient, make somebody's life better, make the way they work better, right? Like all these pieces. So from that side, right, it feels the same from a high, I would say very high level. What you're seeing now, and I think with I would say rapidity of change, we're accelerating so quickly with these AI pieces. I think cloud virtualization was the first, WWW, right, was kind of that first game changer. Email, external, and all these things that kind of changed the way and how quickly we interfaced with our customers and other businesses. But then virtualization changed a lot of things from the operational side. But I think the real big change for what I saw from an ops team and business application team was as we shifted into this SaaS cloud SaaS world, right? And then now what I'm seeing is AI is just enabling everything so quickly. I'm living in a prompt that has this incredible amount of power behind it. So it's an extremely simple interface, if we want to be very honest with ourselves, a very, for lack of a better word, dumbed down interface, right? Like we've simplified everything down to where I'm just looking at a single sentence essentially as my input, and output, is where I'm starting at. So I can take a very complex idea or task, prompt it, and have this massive amount of machinery on the back end that I don't know how it works, how it runs, and I don't need to know how it works and runs to get it to do some very complex tasks that could have taken a whole engineering team to do previously. So we've extracted everything down from such a complex level to such a simplified level over the last few years with what AI is and where we're going to see it going, that it's really it's quite phenomenal. I think there's there's plenty of strategists and visionaries that saw this coming 10, 20 years ago, but to see it actually happen is pretty wild, I might have to say.
Okay, so we'll get back onto AI later because I don't think I've done any of these interviews over the last couple of years where, of course,
Yeah.
AI doesn't come into it at some point. But
Yeah.
as I understand in this space, and actually I don't really know that much about the virtualization space today, so I'm really interested to find out as well kind of how that's all hanging together. So what I understand is today that organizations are mixing and matching solutions more. So they might be running, I don't know, Hyper-V and VMware on premises. They might be doing some of it in the cloud, whether like a platform as a service or I don't know, even something that they've cooked up for themselves in the cloud. I don't know, but why is that happening? Why are they creating that complexity? Why not just choose one solution and go with it? And does what they're doing now remind you of anything that's happened in the past? Can you compare it to anything that's happened previously?
Yeah, I think the reason for the different solution types is you always, well, it's really hard to ever see a business, and I've yet to see it in my years of experience, where a business is just completely aligned, completely across every team department.
Right,
Everybody ends
right.
up having a different little need or a preference, right? You come in, maybe an executive comes in or an engineer or lead engineer, and they've
Mm-hmm.
used let's say AWS or this type of virtualization or Hyper-V or have a preference there, right? And they know how to
Mm-hmm.
implement quickly what they're trying to drive for the business. And the use
Right.
case makes sense in that pocket, and then they run forward. Because it's very rare to see a business that's completely aligned across every branch, across every business unit, across every,
Right.
lead individual. And what can happen and what we've seen happen, what I've seen happen over and over again is that thing becomes successful or core dependent and has a ROI or a business driver attached to it, and getting away from it, unwinding it at that point, and normalizing it to what may have been your standard becomes very very difficult. Or maybe the investment isn't there to do that because it is at that point not a big win. The win to build it was there for the business, but the win to refactor it into a new environment isn't there. And that's the stuff that I've always seen kind of lag and drag behind in an environment that kind of holds you to having your Azure and AWS and GCP and your VMware on-prem still, or VMware in your data center co-load. Those things have always kind of stuck out for me and as a bit of a sore thumb that it's always hard to work out is that
Mm-hmm.
I would consider it tech dead, even if it's not an aged environment, just because it isn't within your normal standard environment that you've built over the years. So that's what I've been
Right.
my experience.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I imagine that with all this complexity, there's quite a difficult situation for IT to maybe manage some of these virtualized infrastructures, across, maybe different teams on premises, in the cloud.
Yeah.
And, what are the real challenges with managing those very complex technologies?
I mean, there's the obvious of the complexity of just having multiple environments, but obviously, as you go deeper, there's skill set differences. Duplication of
Mm-hmm.
services you need. Let's say maybe potentially your monitoring tool or your security tool that you're using in one environment isn't as ideally suited for the other. It's very rare to
Right.
find either a FinOps tool or let's say to drop our name in there, SolarWinds, our monitoring tool that works across all the environments. Of course, ours is built to be multi-cloud, but there's a lot of tooling out there that we'll run into. It's a perfect tool for this environment, and it's just not great over here, or we can't pull the same stats, or can't plug in the same, or can't do the same automation. So then we need to add on another, right? So then you start to get that hitting costs that doesn't always bubble up of having these different environments. I think of just, from the end user environment, you think of Mac and PC, right? Well, of course, got a completely different, oftentimes, tool to manage Mac versus managing PC, and then a different security tool potentially to manage Mac versus PC. So that's a very diluted or very basic example, but it's something that we run into anytime you duplicate and build these different environments, even though maybe the app's very similar, or the coding or the development
Mm-hmm.
environment from a user perspective, but the operational behind the scenes just gets multiplied and duplicated over and over again when you do that. So that's a very hidden cost that's hard to get across oftentimes fully to your leadership, to CFO, and to your executives oftentimes. So I think that's a big one. And then the skills to run that. Right. I may need a specialist that knows GCP very well, and a specialist, of course, that needs VMware and VMware's brand of virtualization and Hyper-V there, because they all are different flavors and have different skill sets. So.
Okay. So could you walk us through a real world scenario? I imagine there's an application, I don't know, that's part of it's running here, part of it's running, in the cloud or whatever that might be. It's very complex. Once the alerts start coming in, what does IT actually have to step through from from an operations perspective to actually resolve a problem?
Yeah, trying to think of some of the best coverages. In the business application environment, I think some of the better ones is a lot of what is our orchestration and kind of what you would consider your service tier and data buses. Those pieces have been built over time, over 10, 15 plus years since the company was selling externally, right? Selling in an e-com type fashion on those pieces. So when oftentimes when this journey was started, some of those tools weren't out there. A lot of those tools weren't out there that you may need now. And I'm sure many businesses have run into this. So they custom build a service tier and an orchestration layer and all these things that are your MuleSoft, Workatos, all these other pieces now. So you have that layer that may be very much custom built. And I've seen that across other companies. Then you also have your data layer, what would be your normal, data warehouse that could be self-hosted still or could be up in the cloud. In our situation, we had some of that still self-hosted in our data centers. And then you have all the applications that are relying on that, both from customer-facing, sales-facing, marketing's integrated into those. And then, of course, all your financial systems are integrated into those to make a sale, make a transaction, deliver a service key so the end user can work with their license, right? So that is a very complex thing that also has revenue tied to it, right? So anytime you have, obviously, as you know, anytime you have revenue tied to something, it becomes a higher level of stress for everyone that's involved. So having run and managed those systems across a few different businesses, I've seen where that technical debt, I would call it technical debt, whether the code is old or not, just that it's not standardized, creates such a high level of operational workload, because your typical kind of, if I think of as somebody that's operating on a web dev, right, or web ops type person, they're not generally going to have experience deep in the data layer, or let's say with the backend .NET code that's potentially running, or whatever code you may have built your orchestration and service tiers on. So at that point, you have a very complex system that has often multiple teams, because those aren't generally a combined team in really most organizations. And you're now talking about traffic that's spanning cloud, potentially private cloud, and potentially colo or on-prem, and oftentimes across different geos. That type of trying to bring that data together across all those teams when you have a transaction failure or just a delay is very difficult, and can end up in a bit of finger pointing of what network, what are you doing, or database guys, what are you doing, kind of thing. And I've seen that pretty consistently over my career, being as I've been exposed more to the e-com pieces. So triggering, let's say, that environment and getting everybody on the same page quickly when something happens sideways. I've seen in some past lives, we're getting 30, 40 people on a call, right? Anytime, because it is such a high priority, because it is revenue impacting. And that's very costly to a business, right? Whether we realize it or not, right? Anytime you're dragging that many high level engineers into one meeting is obviously has a very high price tag on it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the most complex type of situation that I've seen very consistently across businesses, because those systems always are spread across multiple teams, whether it be marketing, sales, wherever web and those other pieces may sit, along with your traditional ops. Bringing the noise out of that is probably one of your best use cases for what AI is doing now. Because traditionally, I've seen just where we're fighting, we gotta have all those people on the same call, because you have to real time get confirmation that because networking is, and everybody's generally going to say no first, it's not us, because they're not seeing anything right away, potentially because other systems aren't impacted. So that's where that finger pointing can become a bit of a time delay to resolution, because no, the database is running fine, everybody else's workloads are running fine, network's running fine, everybody else's network's running fine.
Yeah. So it's like a hot ball of coal that people just want to pass around.
It is.
Hopefully it's not their issue, but
No,
but
and
unfortunately,
it's always everybody means the best, and but they all have their day job they're focused on. They got 19 other priorities. So all of a sudden they're jerked into this thing. Everybody else is running fine. This has got to be your problem, right? It's never an intentional thing generally. Getting clarity on that ability to observe actually that transaction all the way through the system is, and where AI is starting to take that noise out of it, right? With these different tools that are coming out, such as, SolarWinds AI Ops piece that we've dropped. Like, those pieces are what I'm seeing as one of the larger game changer of my experiences in the last 15, 16 years of these rapidly changing multiple stakeholders. It's not just an IT-owned application anymore. It hasn't been for a long time, right? As you've gone to cloud SaaS to more of this world. And I think that's one of the bigger game changers. Before, you could just strangle the neck of IT, right?
So tell us a little bit about the AI integration into SolarWinds, and is this what you've just mentioned? Is this something that kind of automatically happens in the background, or do I still need to be able to kind of get the right prompts to get the information out of the logs that are being collected that I would need, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not a product engineer to be open on that one, but from everything, my exposure with it and with the team, what I've seen is, yes, a lot of this can automatically happen as far as these are out of your out of your norms, right? So what we've been observing is your normal traffic, your normal utilization, your normal pieces are here. So we need to start triggering those. Where, in my experience back when I was doing this stuff more hands-on, quite a period ago, you were having to manually decide that this much memory utilization or this much network was a problem. And oftentimes you would get all those false alerts, as we know, because it was just a spike. So getting to that point where that was more, as you said, automatically, right? Like, as that started to happen, that is a huge, huge improvement. But what we're seeing with the observability piece and with where AI is bringing that noise out of the system is its ability to really learn your environment and really understand from essentially like having multiple engineers there staring at it as you would as in like a knock in the old days, is that ability to know what is normal in this environment and trigger what isn't. And then being able to prompt and ask, right, across this larger environment, as maybe I am the network guy or I am the database guy, but I don't know these other systems really well. I can ask what is normal and what isn't normal is more of a natural language thing, right? So that ability is phenomenal, and similar ability, right, we're seeing in like the Claudes and these other tools that are out there. That ability just to distill a very complex situation that I may not be a completely a SME on into terms that make sense to me is such a game changer, in my opinion. Me as not a fully technical person at this point in time can prompt something and get an answer, right?
Yeah. Sure. So from your experience, or maybe from the new capabilities and the observability that's also kind of got AI bolted onto it today, are there any things that tend to break first or tend to be bottlenecks in these very complex virtualized systems that cause problems that teams don't necessarily see, or is it very individual for each separate environment?
I think it's very individual. It's always that, I mean, I would say from that perspective, it's always that kind of unknown gremlin, right? Potentially when this was being configured back originally, maybe it was spec'd or sized for what the original plan was. And of course, you know how things always evolve and grow. You've grown past that. You just haven't seen that ugly quite come out yet, or however it is impacting the environment, you're not quite realizing that the bottleneck is in this ABC area, whether it be, you know, we provision these VMs with SSDs on or non-SSD type workload and in the Azure environment because we didn't need the IOPS at that point in time. And we don't realize that we're hitting a threshold, right? So some of those things, being able to come out of a very large environment and just quickly identify that with some of these new tools that are coming out is phenomenal, right? Because it takes that, I had to go down and look at every IOP, every disk and look for this one time at midnight that we start to hit this, you know, high workload utilization that we're not realizing, and it's having this follow-on effect. That's something that we're seeing that AI is able to correlate that normally would take a lot of time and man hours and a skilled engineer to be digging through. So,
okay. So I guess the next question is kind of, there are two parts to it. So where do these new tools fall short? But where do they, you know, still allow for some human judgment? You know, because I assume that they're not perfect at this stage. We're not getting rid of all of our, you know, our engineers and security people and all the rest of it anytime soon, I suppose. But we're getting rid of a lot of the busy work. So what is left? You know, what still really requires expertise and judgment, where these tools are not able to, you know, automate remediations or give advice about what should be fixed. So where does the human element still come into it? Where is it still required today? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. What I've seen is each step of the way that we've, you know, I'll say believe that we've simplified things. There's always this massive level of complexity that's been hidden behind it. And I've seen it happen in some environments I've come into where I walked in and it hadn't happened here, thankfully, but I've walked into other environments where, well, we let go of the network team because we're cloud now. Right. And we don't need network engineers anymore because it's all in the cloud and, you know, Microsoft or GCP or whoever else handles our networking now, where realistically, no, you obviously have a massive amount of networking within that environment that needs to be correlated, you know, built and configured and mapped out properly. So I think one of the perceptions that can oftentimes happen from a more removed leadership is that these things will be offset by, we can drop these personnel over here and we don't need as many personnel over here skilled, you know, that may be kind of high cost, particularly when you're talking about some of the security skill sets, DevSecOps, you know, some of those other bigger trigger words right now that are very in demand in the environment, in the global market. So I think that's one of the larger mistakes I've seen is as we've presented a more and more simplified front end to the folks that are not as technical or may not have as technical of a role, there's this perception that there's nothing technical happening, or not as much technical happening behind it because I am seeing this simple interface. You think about, let's use an iPhone or something for an example. We may think that because I have all this massive amount of information at my fingertip and I can drag and drop it, that it didn't take a, you know, tens of thousands of people on the back end engineering it and developing it and building it, right? All that technical bit behind it. So I think that's one of the larger kind of just things and misconceptions that can happen as we simplify that front end interface for technology. It's still, if you don't roll out AI properly, whatever the tool may be, if you're not watching all the API utilization, token utilization, if you're not watching the way you're integrating security and what accesses you're giving these systems to each other, you're asking for just so much potential security risk and so much potential operational risk. And I think that's one of the things that we hopefully have learned the lesson on over the years, but I don't think it always happens at all the leadership levels that we remember those lessons. So. Yeah.
Okay, so everything's changing very quickly at the moment, especially in the AI space.
Yeah.
Where what challenges do you see coming up for IT teams managing very complex virtualized infrastructures over the next couple of years, and maybe things that they certainly don't see coming today?
Yeah. That one's tough. What I've seen, what I've been watching and kind of keeping me up and thinking about is, if you just think of the where is this tech taking us, right? I go back to that simple prompt interface. I think we're going to see the world start to change around everything becoming this simple but extremely powerful prompt. I'm going to eventually live in a single one. I think for now we're going to live in multiple ones. We're going to have our more horizontal ones, and we're going to have our more very specialized vertical ones. But something's going to end up bringing that all together, whatever that group or company or device or whatever it is, over the next 5-10 years. So I think with that, as we say that continue that simplification of that interface to very complex things, that piece is going to have all that hidden, like I see still, right? Like with cloud and SaaS environments, well, we still have a very complex on-prem environment. We still have a very complex workloads that didn't translate into the modern necessarily simply, that would need to be completely refactored or changed the way we're using them. And since those are still required by the business, they can kind of get forgotten. IT remembers it, because we're still running it every day, and you may have a 5, 10, 20 person team that's still running that. The rest of the business is just seeing this simple interface, and its memory is much shorter, from like a executive leadership type perspective, because they're always looking quarter to quarter, month to month on all business deliverables. So what seen there is that those workloads get forgotten. And kind of just in a way dismissed, oftentimes by the business as being, well, we don't need any of that stuff anymore because we're all over here. And it's like, well, we are 70% over here. And that's what I've seen very consistently. And I think this velocity of change is just going to continue to increase, being enabled both from a development environment, but also from just the tech is going to develop faster and faster because we're making development faster and faster. And then we're also delivering these tools to the rest of the business that allow the rest of the business to operate even more efficiently. So everything's going to get so fast, I see, in the way our lives work, that we're going to have a short memory, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. So we've talked about, the simplification of the front end quite a bit. And as you've alluded to, a lot of the complexity on the back end is, for many reasons, because of different decisions being made across different teams, or technical debt. You can't easily just start again and build an ideal system from scratch, because these things are already in production, and things just get more and more complex for various different reasons over time. So it seems that there are two sides to this. We're kind of simplifying everything on the kind of from the UI end of things, maybe down to just a prompt, as you said, as things potentially grow ever more complex on the back end. But if I was to step, let's say, just for a moment into a world which could just be fantasy or science fiction, do you see a time where AI might be able to help us re-architect and re-engineer these very complex systems, so that we not only have more simplicity on the front end, but are also able to reduce that complexity with less risk on the back end?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, that's what I'm very much expecting. We're not quite fully seeing. You're seeing it in the dev environment very quickly, right?
Right.
You're seeing it in the DevSecOps environment coming up very rapidly as well, starting to take that noise out of the system, show you what really matters, generate full environments and code and development pieces for you. I think the operational side, due to its complexity, due to all the different hardware vendors and different iOS types and CLI types and everything else, is a much bigger piece to chew off. I personally kind of feel like you're going to get refactored devices, right? There will be a Cisco switch that has this stuff natively built into it, a Palo Alto firewall that has these things natively built into it. And we're going to get to some kind of communication layer that's very ubiquitous across them, because I think refactoring, teaching AI to learn every CLI and every change in every CLI version over, 20 years that we've had these devices out there. It's not impossible, because they're doing amazing things with it now, but I don't know if the kind of the juice is worth the squeeze on it from a financial, what it would take to build that model and run that model. So
it doesn't sound very efficient either. So
it doesn't. I mean, if I just think of our environment, all the different vendors we have in our environment across the globe, it's monumental. I can't imagine teaching an AI to do that well and really trusting that it's going to execute each level of code in those devices well. I know somebody's obviously going to try, because it's, I'm sure, multi-billion dollar problem. So somebody's going to try it. I think for it to fully be successful, we'll see that next generation of layer that extracts that out and gives a very unified communication layers. That's my crystal ball on it, just because of the complexity of that issue. I have yet to see anything really drop in that level. Everything's been way out here, your railways and clouds and everything. They're giving you that. I don't have to know how to run the cloud anymore, and I can develop an app and drop it out there. And I don't have to worry about the security of the app, essentially. I don't have to run Azure anymore. I don't have to run GCP anymore, and I don't need that team anymore. I don't know what's going to happen first for businesses, because I think so many businesses are still going to be tied to some of those legacy things that have that complexity. Or are we just going to completely move past it because we don't even want to try to solve that problem? That's the 50-50 for me, that I would, if I was a betting man, I would have a hard time picking, black or red on that one. Yeah.
Okay. For people in IT leadership roles, how are their roles going to change with all of this new technology?
So what I've seen for me personally over the years is, as we've simplified technology, as we've made it possible for a marketing, leader or a, sales, pro to be able to self-enable. Well, that's amazing. That should be great. But we end up with more shadow IT and duplicative solutions if you're not, as a business, aligned on how you're bringing those pieces in. So you just give somebody the corporate P card and let them run free with their budget, you're going to end up with 20 different apps that aren't integrated and have a lot of duplicate technology on that piece. So I think, as I view the job as IT is shifting, taking all of our experience, whether you be new in the role, but you're just having that mindset around technology, or very seasoned, taking that experience to be a strategic partner to help guide that these tools are great, but at the end of the day, what is your business requirements? Do we have something that is very close to those, that meets 90% of those? And maybe it's not the number one app currently this month in marketing tech or in sales tech, but maybe it's been number 3 for the last 10 years. So it's a very established partner, and we have that product already. Maybe we don't need to go get number 1 just to have number 1 in that one little segment if it's got a lot of duplicative pieces. So I see the role as IT is taking all of our foundational experience and what we should be doing as a G&A function, spanning the business, to help guide strategically on how we implement AI and this new technology just across the board, all these apps that are dropping very horizontally across the business in a way that's cohesive. And I think bringing that together and being an enabler of it is what IT's function is. And that's been my most advice to both my leadership team and my peers and everybody that I work with is being a strategic visionary and bringing that solution to the business as we see those problems. So.
Okay. So we haven't talked very much about SolarWinds kind of virtualization, infrastructure management solutions as such, but could you give us a quick overview of how that all hangs together? What's on offer? Is it one product? Is it a suite of products for somebody who doesn't know these tools at all?
Well, so traditionally, right, if you look back at traditionally SolarWinds, we were very focused on the on-prem and solving a lot of problems on-prem.
Yep.
And that was where our core product was, and one that I grew up using, back in my beginning days in this world of IT. And it solved so many problems for me that I loved the brand and eventually got the luck to be up here working for a brand that I'd used and experienced for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. Now what I'm seeing, and is always kind of has been SolarWinds' motto, is bringing this complex noise and the stress that is on the IT pro and helping simplify it. And that's what I'm seeing about it as we've been implementing AI ops and these other pieces in our newest tooling, is that we're bridging these hybrid environments, which a lot of business, like we talked about previously, a lot of businesses forget that they have some of this older legacy stuff that's running some critical thing, and it just doesn't factor well into modern environment. It's not necessarily that it's technical debt. It's just there's not a better way of doing it at the same price point oftentimes with what is out there. Because if you look at all the cloud providers, they're very much, they don't want to be the kitchen sink, right? They want to provide very clean tooling that is very simple and enables a certain type of workload. So if your workload doesn't fully fit that, they don't necessarily want it up in GCP or AWS or Azure either. They want you to refactor and change the way you're doing everything to meet that, their container.
Right.
So that's what I've seen, is if you have something that doesn't quite fit into that new sink, you still need to manage and monitor that. And that obviously has a lot of other infrastructure around it. You may have, you're going to have all your networking, you're going to have your firewalls, you're going to have your security, you're going to have your switches, right? All those pieces that it takes to run that workload. And that is complex and is not easy to monitor and maintain. And you're talking about, you need to patch your own stuff, and you need to deal with lifecycle management, and you need to have physical access. And bringing that where I can now sit as an engineer and I can watch what's happening in all these different cloud environments I have, and I can bring together the view of what's on-prem into a simple unified environment. That's to me what this is doing, and that to me is still meets a huge need, because I've yet to, short of a startup type environment, very lean, just getting started, I have yet to see an environment where they didn't have this large thing still over here that was kind of a little forgotten about, in a way. So that's what I see, and that's what I see our tooling doing, is meeting that need. So
great. So I guess people should head over to solarwinds.com if they're not familiar with the products and solutions there. Yeah.
I definitely have to put in a tag for that, being both a user of the product and a fan, but and working for the business, obviously. But yes, I think there's a lot of solutions that we provide. There are a lot of solutions we can provide out there and help. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's a really interesting conversation. It sounds like there's lots of really interesting stuff going on, especially in the AI space, of course.
Yeah, no, it is exciting as a technologist, watching all these things happen. To be part of a company that's also doing that and solving a lot of problems is just, it's kind of a dream job, right? Being able to see all these things come together. There's so much. Remembering the human element, remembering what is happening, what it takes to make this simplified view that I see, all the development, all of the engineering that provides this to us. That's something I think that's key for all of us, is we're going to get, there's so much information coming at us. If we simplify these things and remembering what it takes to make all this work, I think is one of the core parts for me, right? And reminding the business of it, right? So, yeah.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you very much again. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you want to find out more, of course, you can head over to SolarWinds and have a look to see what's on offer there with the different products and solutions. But that's it for today, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.